When I first stepped into this house as a young bride, I never imagined how many stories its walls would hold. Back then, the paint was fresh, the furniture was modest, and life felt like an unopened gift box. My husband and I built everything brick by brick, through struggle, patience, and love. Every corner carried a piece of us. The front porch was where he drank his morning tea. The dining table was where we saved our pennies to send our only son to college. And the living room, it was once filled with laughter, festivals, and relatives gathering around with joy. But today, that same house feels heavier. The walls echo differently. The air carries silence instead of laughter. Because now I walk through it as a widow. My husband is gone, and the son we raised with so much love has returned. This time, not alone. He came back with his wife, my daughter-in-law. At first, my heart welcomed her. I hoped she would fill the house with the warmth of another daughter. I dreamed of hearing her call me Ma with affection, of watching the family bond grow stronger, but slowly, shadows began to creep in. It started with little things, my morning prayers at the small temple in the hallway. She rolled her eyes, saying, "This chanting so early, it disturbs my sleep." The meals I cooked with care, following traditions passed from my mother. She would whisper to my son, "Why does she still cook like we're in the old days? We should eat modern food." And during family dinners, while I tried to keep conversations light, she would smile politely at me, but the smile never reached her eyes. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was just adjustment. Maybe she would soften with time. But the unease grew heavier. I began noticing how she spoke to relatives, how she presented herself in gatherings. Her words weren't the words of a newcomer trying to blend in. They were the words of someone trying to take over. One evening, I overheard her on the phone, laughing softly with a friend. Her words froze me in place. She said, "Just wait. Soon everyone will know who really runs this house." I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. That wasn't just arrogance. It was a warning. The home I had built with sacrifice, the dignity I had protected for decades, was about to be challenged in ways I had never imagined. And in that moment, I realized this house, once my safe haven, was about to become my battlefield. The days that followed felt like walking on glass. Each step I took in my own home seemed to disturb my daughter-in-law. She began to treat the house as though it were her stage, and I was nothing more than a faded backdrop. At dinner, I placed the food on the table like I always did. My son used to love my lentil stew, the very dish that carried him through exams and late nights of study. But now, as soon as I served it, she wrinkled her nose. "Again this?" she said, almost playfully, but with enough sharpness that I felt the sting. My son glanced at her, then at me. For a moment, I thought he would defend me, but he lowered his gaze and stayed silent. The silence of a son can cut deeper than the words of a stranger. Family dinners, once filled with warmth, turned into battlegrounds of invisible war. She would challenge the smallest traditions. "Why do we still light candles before meals? It's unnecessary. Why does she always sit at the head of the table? Shouldn't that be your place now, my love?" Each word was a seed planted in my son's heart, seeds that slowly grew into roots of doubt. He began to shift in his chair when I spoke, to sigh quietly when I prayed aloud. I tried to ignore it, telling myself love would guide him back. But her whispers were louder than my silence. One evening, relatives came over for tea. I served them with the same hospitality I always had, but she leaned across the table, smiling sweetly, and said, "Honestly, Auntie, Uncle, we're thinking of redecorating. This house is so old-fashioned. Don't you think it's time for a modern touch?" Laughter erupted around the table. I forced a smile, but inside, my heart crumbled. They didn't see the pain behind her words. They didn't know these walls were built from sacrifices. Each brick, each curtain, each picture on the wall carried my husband's sweat and my patience. But to her, it was just outdated decor. After the guests left, I quietly washed the cups in the kitchen sink. I heard her voice in the living room, low but firm. "Darling, you should manage the money now. Your mother doesn't understand investments." Times have changed. Don't you want us to grow to live better?" Her tone was honeyed, but her eyes sharp, and my son— He nodded. That nod broke something inside me. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. About shifting the balance of power in this house, brick by brick, decision by decision. I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes silence is the only weapon a mother has. Still, I prayed for strength. Strength to watch my own child slip through my fingers. Strength to endure the smirks, the rolling eyes, the subtle insults disguised as jokes. But arrogance is like a flame. It starts small, but if unchecked, it consumes everything. The turning point came at a family gathering. The living room was full, relatives, neighbors, even old friends. She dressed like a queen, draped in jewelry that once belonged to me, jewelry I had handed over willingly, believing she would honor it. Halfway through the evening, she stood up with a glass of wine in her hand. She tapped it lightly, calling for everyone's attention. The room fell silent. With a triumphant smile, she looked around at the guests and declared, "It's time everyone respects the new authority in this house." Her words cut through the air like a blade. Gasps spread across the room. Some laughed nervously, others stared in disbelief. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the rest of her speech. My son, my own son, sat by her side, his silence sealing her words into truth. And in that moment I realized this wasn't arrogance anymore. This was a declaration of war. The festival season had always been my favorite time of year. The house would come alive with colors, laughter, and the aroma of sweets filling every room. Even after my husband's passing, I tried to keep the traditions alive, believing that if the walls remembered joy, maybe my son would too. This year, though, things felt different. I decorated the front porch with lanterns, arranged the sweets on silver trays, and lit candles at the entrance. I wanted everything to look welcoming, just as it always had. But the moment my daughter-in-law walked into the room, I saw her eyes scan the decorations with thinly veiled disapproval. She leaned toward my son and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. So old-fashioned. "People will think we're stuck in the past." Her words pierced deeper than she knew. By evening, the house was crowded. Relatives, neighbors, friends, everyone had come. Laughter echoed, children ran about with sparklers, and the air carried that sweet warmth of community. I tried to blend into the background as I always did lately, offering trays of snacks, ensuring everyone was comfortable. But she basked in the spotlight, wearing a glittering new outfit adorned in jewelry I once wore for the same festival. She walked among the guests like she owned the place. Her voice was louder, her laughter more dramatic, her presence demanding attention. I stayed silent. After all, what mattered to me was peace, not applause. But peace doesn't last when arrogance sits at the table. When the music softened and the guests settled, she suddenly rose to her feet. She clinked her glass with a spoon, just as she had at the last gathering. The chatter died down, eyes turned toward her. She smiled, a smile polished for performance, and said, "Dear family and friends, tonight isn't just about celebration. It's about change. A new era in this house." I froze. Her words rippled through the room like a cold wind. She turned toward me, then spread her arms wide as if unveiling a grand surprise. For too long, this home has been run by outdated traditions, but now it's time for progress, for modern thinking. From this day on, she paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the anticipation build. Then, with a voice as sharp as glass, she declared, "Call me the new queen of this house." Gasps echoed. A murmur rose among the guests. Some laughed nervously, thinking it a joke. Others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to clap or stay silent. But I sat frozen. My hands trembled as they gripped the edge of my chair. My throat went dry. My eyes stung with unshed tears. The words didn't just humiliate me, they erased me. In that one moment, in front of everyone I knew, she stripped away the dignity I had carried for decades. I looked at my son. hoping, begging, with my eyes that he would say something. Anything. But he sat beside her, silent once again. His silence was the loudest betrayal of all. The relatives shifted in their seats, whispering to each other. Some stared at me with pity, others avoided my gaze entirely. To them, I must have looked like a defeated queen whose crown had just been stolen. She raised her glass high, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "To new beginnings," she said. "To my reign over this house." Laughter and applause followed, not from everyone, but enough to pierce my heart. I forced a weak smile, but inside, a storm was raging. My sacrifices, my years of endurance, my memories with my husband, all reduced to a punchline in her performance. As the guests turned back to their conversations, I lowered my gaze to my trembling hands. The bangles on my wrist jingled softly, a reminder of the woman I once was. I whispered to myself, so quietly that only the walls could hear. If she wants a queen's crown, let her wear it for now, because deep inside, beneath the pain and humiliation, a small ember of strength still burned. I knew this battle was only beginning, and one day, the truth would rise. After that festival night, nothing in the house felt the same. The words, "Call me the new queen of this house," echoed in my ears, replaying each time I walked through the hallways. Even the walls seemed to carry her laughter, mocking me silently. I tried to hold on to patience. I told myself, this is just pride. It will pass. But arrogance has a way of spreading, and soon it began to infect the one person I had always trusted with my life. My son. At first, it was subtle. He no longer asked me before making decisions about the house. Repairs, expenses, purchases, all discussed between him and his wife. I was only informed afterward, like a tenant being updated by a landlord. One afternoon, I overheard them in the living room. She said, "We should renovate the upstairs rooms. Tear down the old furniture, bring in modern designs." My son replied, "Yes, you're right. The old style doesn't suit us anymore. The old style. That was my husband's taste, my memories, our history." But in my son's voice, I didn't hear resistance. I heard agreement. The more she pushed, the more he echoed. "Why do we still follow these rituals? She doesn't understand investments." Maybe it's time we modernize everything. Each word struck me like a dagger. It wasn't just my daughter-in-law anymore. It was my son, my own flesh and blood, carrying her voice like a parrot. And then came the finances. For decades, I had managed the household budget carefully, stretching every rupee, every dollar, ensuring we never lived beyond our means. But suddenly my son insisted, "Ma, let me and my wife handle the money now. You've done enough. We know better ways." I tried to argue gently. "Beta, I know how to run this house. I've done it all my life. Your father trusted me." But his eyes hardened. "Times have changed. Ma, you wouldn't understand." Those words crushed me more than any insult from her could. Soon, the bank accounts were shifted. Bills redirected, and within weeks, I had no say over my own home. My daughter-in-law strutted around as if she had won a kingdom, and my son followed her like a loyal soldier. She began selling things that carried my heart. The antique clock from my father's home, gone. The silver set gifted at my wedding, sold, even. The embroidered curtains I had stitched with my own hands, discarded as ugly. Each heirloom was more than an object. It was a memory. And one by one, those memories were erased. I tried to stop her once. "Please, don't sell your father-in-law's things. They're part of our history," she smirked, tilting her head. "History doesn't pay the bills, Ma. You should thank me. I'm upgrading your house." Her voice dripped with mockery. And my son just stood there, silent. Again. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the empty spaces where the heirlooms once stood. I felt like a ghost in my own home. A queen dethroned, not by strangers, but by those I had loved most. But fate has a strange way of revealing truth. One morning, while cleaning the old trunk in my husband's study, I found an envelope tucked beneath the lining. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a document, his handwritten instructions, notarized and signed. My eyes widened as I read the words. The house. This very house was never meant for my son to inherit. My husband had secured it legally in my name, ensuring that no matter what happened, I would always have this home as my sanctuary. Tears welled in my eyes, not just from relief, but from the deep love my husband had shown me, even in death. He had foreseen what I could not. He had protected me in silence. I clutched the document to my chest, whispering, "You knew. You knew they would try to take everything." At that moment, my sorrow began to transform. The humiliation, the betrayal, the silence I had endured, all of it started to harden into something else. Strength. For the first time in weeks, I felt my back straighten, my eyes sharpen. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was defeated, but they had no idea the foundation of this house was not in their hands. It was in mine. From the moment I held that document in my hands, something inside me shifted. I was no longer just a grieving widow enduring humiliation. I was the rightful guardian of this home. My husband's last act of love had ensured that. But wisdom whispered, "Don't strike yet. Watch. Wait. Gather strength." So I did. I tucked the document safely into a place only I knew. Then I carried on as if nothing had changed. I served tea when asked, smiled politely when mocked, and kept my silence when they boasted. But behind my quiet eyes, a plan was forming. Days passed, and I began to observe more carefully. My daughter-in-law's arrogance grew bolder. She walked through the house giving orders, to the maids as if she were the queen she proclaimed to be. Move this furniture. Sell that cabinet. This old rug stinks. Throw it out. Each command felt like a dagger. But instead of confronting her, I watched. I memorized. I noted her dealings, her words, her careless slips in front of guests. At night, when the house fell silent, I would sit by the lamp and write down everything I saw. Every insult, every manipulation, every time she turned my son against me. Piece by piece, I began to build a record, not of my pain, but of her schemes. One evening, when she thought I was asleep, I overheard her whispering to my son, "Darling, next month we'll transfer the house papers into our names. After that, she won't have a say in anything. She'll just live here under our mercy." My son hesitated. "But Ma," she cut him off, her voice cold. "She's old. What does she need power for? It's time we take charge." My heart sank, but I didn't interrupt. Instead, I pressed my ear harder against the door, letting her arrogance reveal her full hand. The next morning, I quietly visited an old family lawyer, one my husband and I had trusted for years. His eyes softened when I showed him the document. "Your husband was a wise man," he said. "This house is legally yours. No one can take it from you without your consent." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but she plans to transfer it. She thinks she already owns it. He leaned forward. "Then let her walk into the trap herself. Let her think she has won. And when the moment comes, we'll show her the truth." For the first time in months, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of determination. Back home, I resumed my role in silence. But my silence was no longer weakness, it was armor. When she mocked my cooking, I said nothing. When she laughed at my prayers, I stayed calm. When she boasted to relatives that, "Soon this house will be ours," I smiled faintly, because deep inside, I knew a storm was waiting to be unleashed. Meanwhile, I quietly reached out to relatives who still respected me. A few cousins, an old neighbor, even a close family friend. I shared little hints, planting seeds of doubt about her intentions. I didn't need them to fight for me, only to be present when the truth finally came to light. Her arrogance was working in my favor. She was too blinded by her ambition to notice the eyes beginning to watch her closely. The breaking point came at a family dinner, arranged by her. She had decorated the table extravagantly, Gold-plated dishes, expensive wines, and food so rich it barely resembled our culture. I sat quietly at one end, feeling like a guest in my own home. As everyone ate, she suddenly rose, her bangles jingling, her voice dripping with pride. "Next month," she announced boldly, "this house will officially be in my name. My husband and I are finalizing the papers. From then on, all decisions will be ours." Gasps spread around the table. Some clapped politely, others exchanged glances of shock. My son, sitting beside her, forced a smile, his silence once again cementing her words. I lowered my gaze to hide my expression. My fingers tightened around my napkin, but my lips curved into the faintest smile, because only I knew the truth. She thought she was building her throne, but in reality, she was building the stage for her own downfall. The day arrived like a storm on the horizon, heavy, tense, inevitable. My daughter-in-law had spent the week boasting to relatives and neighbors. "Soon this house will be legally mine. The papers will be signed and then everyone will know who rules here." Her words spread like wildfire, painting me as a helpless old woman who had no control left. People whispered, pitied, and some even mocked. But I carried on in silence, my face calm, my heart steady, because I knew what she did not. That morning, she dressed in her finest silk saree, her bangles clinking like war drums. My son wore a stiff suit, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge her. I too prepared, but in my own way. I tied my hair neatly, wore a simple sari, and tucked the most important document close to my chest. As we stepped into the lawyer's office, she strutted ahead, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. She looked like a queen marching into her coronation. "Let's get this over with," she said briskly, tossing her purse onto the table. "I have a family dinner planned tonight to celebrate." The lawyer, an elderly man with sharp eyes, nodded politely. "Of course. But before we proceed, there are certain formalities," she smirked, crossing her arms. "Formalities? This house already belongs to my husband's family. I'm just taking my rightful seat as its new mistress." My son shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should slow down," she cut him off, glaring. "Enough, don't embarrass us now. Sign where they tell you." The lawyer calmly spread out the documents. He looked at me, then at her, before speaking. "Madam, you seem to be under a serious misunderstanding." Her smile faltered for the first time. "What do you mean?" "This house," the lawyer continued, tapping his finger firmly on the document, "was never in your husband's name. It was transferred solely to his mother by your late father-in-law before his passing. She is the legal owner. No papers can be signed without her consent." Silence fell like thunder. She blinked rapidly, her voice trembling. That can't be true." "You're lying." The lawyer opened a folder and slid the official deed across the table. "Here are the registered documents. Dated, stamped, sealed. Your husband has no ownership rights. Therefore, neither do you." My son's eyes widened, his face pale. He looked at me for the first time in weeks. Truly looked at me. "Ma, is this true?" I nodded slowly, my calm voice carrying years of patience and pain. "Yes, Beta. Your father made sure I would never be left without dignity." My daughter-in-law slammed her fist on the table. "No, this is my house. I've run it. I've ruled it. Everyone knows me as the queen of this home." The lawyer's voice cut through her hysteria like a blade. "Madam, a queen without a crown is just a pretender. And here, the crown belongs only to her." Her face twisted with disbelief and rage. She turned to my son, grabbing his arm desperately. "Say something. Tell him this isn't right. Tell her to hand it over." But my son remained frozen, his lips parted in shock, his eyes avoiding hers. I stood slowly, smoothing the pleats of my sari. My voice was steady, carrying the weight of truth. This home was built with years of sacrifice, respect, and love. It is not a toy for arrogance nor a prize for mockery. You wanted a throne? You built it on sand. The air in the lawyer's office had turned heavy, thick with silence. My daughter-in-law sat trembling, her hands clutching the armrest of the chair as if it could hold together the world that was crumbling beneath her feet. Her crown, imaginary though it was, had cracked, and now, The shards cut only her. When we returned home, the news traveled faster than wildfire. Relatives, neighbors, even distant cousins, all had heard the truth. That the house she bragged about owning never belonged to her, not even to her husband. It was mine. By evening, people began to gather, pretending to drop by for casual visits but staying to witness the drama. Whispered conversations filled corners of the hall. She said she was the queen. Turns out the real queen was here all along. Such arrogance always brings ruin. Every word was a dagger to her pride. She stormed into the living room, her eyes red, her voice shaking with fury. "Are you all enjoying this? Watching me be humiliated? You think this is funny?" No one answered. Silence was the harshest punishment. Then she turned on me. You planned this all along, didn't you? Sitting quietly, waiting for me to fall, letting me make a fool of myself." I didn't flinch. My calmness was my weapon. "No, Bahu. You made a fool of yourself by forgetting one simple truth. Respect cannot be forced. It must be earned." My son finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Stop this madness! Enough!" He looked at me with tears brimming in his eyes. "Ma, I can't believe I let it go this far. I let her words blind me. I hurt you." I looked at him, my heart aching but resolute. "You forgot your roots, Beta. You forgot the hands that raised you. But realization is the first step to repentance." My daughter-in-law grabbed his arm desperately. "Don't listen to her. She's turning you against me. Haven't I stood by you? Haven't I cared for this house?" He pulled his hand away. "No, you didn't care for the house. You only cared for the throne you imagined here." Her pride finally broke. She fell to her knees, her tears staining the marble floor. Please don't destroy me. I only wanted respect. I only wanted to be seen as important in this family." Her voice cracked like shattered glass. The arrogance that once fueled her words was gone, leaving behind only desperation. I stepped closer, my shadow falling over her bowed head. "Respect is not seized through humiliation. It is given through love, patience, and humility. You demanded a crown, but you never built a kingdom worthy of it." Relatives murmured, some with pity, some with judgment. My son looked torn, caught between anger and sorrow. The daughter-in-law clasped my feet, her voice trembling. "Forgive me. Please forgive me." I looked down at her, not with hatred, not with triumph, but with a weary strength that had carried me through years of sacrifice. "I will forgive you," I said softly. "But forgiveness does not erase consequences. You must face the weight of your choices." Then I turned to the gathered family and neighbors. My voice rang with finality. You all heard her declare herself queen of this house. You all watched as she mocked my place, insulted my dignity, and tried to seize what was never hers. Let this be a lesson. Pride without respect, greed without gratitude, it destroys not just a person, but the home around them. Her sobs echoed in the room. My son knelt beside me, tears falling freely. "Ma, I was blind, please. Give me a chance to make things right." I placed a hand on his head, blessing him despite my pain. "You are my son. You lost your way, but you have not lost my love. Remember this moment, and never let anyone's pride turn you against your blood again." The house was silent after the storm. The echoes of tears, confessions, and broken pride still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. But within that silence, something new was taking root. Clarity. My daughter-in-law sat quietly in the corner, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked smaller now, not because of her posture, but because the arrogance that once made her loom so large had vanished. My son hovered nearby, as though torn between comforting her and seeking forgiveness from me. His shoulders, once proud, now sagged under the weight of guilt. I walked slowly across the room, each step deliberate, each word measured. "This house," I said softly, "was never about walls or inheritance. It was about family, about the love your father and I built brick by brick. That is why he left it in my name, not to take power, but to protect peace." I looked at my daughter-in-law. Her lips trembled, Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. Bahu, you came here as a bride. You were welcomed as a daughter. But somewhere along the way, you mistook respect for power and family for a throne. Tears spilled down her cheeks again. She whispered, I see that now. I was wrong. So wrong. The relatives who had gathered nodded in agreement, their faces solemn. Neighbors who once whispered now sat quietly, humbled by the lesson unfolding before them. I continued, my voice steady. A queen is not made by jewels or by loud declarations. A queen is made by how she cares for those around her. A true queen protects, uplifts, and sacrifices. That is why I never needed to announce my place here, because it was carved through love, not arrogance. My son fell to his knees in front of me. His voice broke with remorse. Ma, forgive me. I let her words sway me. I forgot who I was. I forgot who you are. I placed my trembling hand on his head. You lost your way, Beta, but you have found it again. That is enough for a mother's heart. The daughter-in-law crawled forward, her forehead nearly touching the floor. Please don't send me away. Give me one more chance to prove I can change. For a long moment, I looked at her. This was the same woman who once declared herself queen of my house, who mocked my place, who tried to erase my dignity. And now she knelt at my feet, stripped of pride, pleading for mercy. Stand up, I said at last. I will not throw you out. This house does not cast away family. But remember, your second chance is not a gift, it is a responsibility. Earn your place, not with arrogance, but with respect. A hush fell over the room. The relatives bowed their heads. The neighbors murmured blessings, and my son wept openly, holding my hands in gratitude. The weight of years, of sacrifice, of silent endurance, suddenly lifted from my heart. I turned toward the doorway, my voice rising above the silence, calm, steady, and proud.